I want to thank you for giving some time for us today. I know the weekends get pretty hectic because that's the only time that we have the kind of unwind from work, right? So for everybody who doesn't know, I used to work with Reg. We used to work in the same company. I'm still there. He's moved on to a bigger, better place. But I brought him here today for him to share kind of his thoughts and ideas. Yeah, he's a very, very veteran multi-sport athlete. He's raced all over the world, and it doesn't that success doesn't happen overnight. And I wanted him to come in and share what he went through and the path that he took to get there. Tell us a little bit more about, how what he does in training, what he does when he races, and everything that leads up to that. How does that help him, kind of in facing the challenges of real life, especially in this type of situation. So, Reg, thank you, my friend, for coming in.
Thank you, Toby. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, and congratulations on your first podcast. Is this going to be the
The
first
first,
podcast
you're the first
episode?
guy, the
All
debut
right.
episode. All right, and we're
All
gonna have
right.
you back. A lot of the multi-sport athletes, I think, like start with one and then add the other and then finish off with the third. So for you, where did it start? Were you a runner first, or a cyclist, or a swimmer?
Okay. So to give a bit of background, I'll share some photos. So my background is it's our little family thing. I was lucky to be born into a family of triathletes, actually, runners, swimmers, cyclists, as early as the 80s. So there in the middle, in those speedos, yes, triathletes race in speedos in the early days, where there were barely any sponsors, there were no celebrities or any following. But that's my uncle Jeng right there. He was the champion of the. I remember I was a child. I was a kid there. We were watching them race in Matabungkay. It was the Heartbreak
Wow,
Triathlon, I think.
Matabungkay, old
So
school, really old school.
Matabungkay, yes.
Ah,
So these guys, they're part of the UP swim team and the UP Mountaineers, the ones who are crazy back then, still crazy these days, engaging in some of the new sports, right? And then so it's the next generations, the cousin. So that's my sister Andrea, and then Joyette, who are also triathletes. Our cousin Noy, who's the brother of Joyette. They're both champions of the Ironman Philippines. My sister also in with David Salon. And if you notice the picture there of my so we start them young, actually. That's Pia, my niece. They get into racing before they could have breakfast. But basically, this wasn't a hobby for us growing up. It was part of our lifestyle. Most of us were into we're into sports. We were playing tag in our grandparents. When we go swimming, we were always running. So it was basically the bonding thing. But born into this family, I would actually consider myself the bottom performer, not as decorated as these cousins of ours who get into the podium, because my starting point, Toby, was ako yung sakiting bata. I had asthma. I had asthma from when I was young, and that's what got me into swimming.
okay.
So
So swimming first.
swimming was my starting point for relief in asthma. And then so I was varsity team from grade school to college. And then I got into running when I was with the Mountaineers in college. So joined some adventure races, trail running, and then got into triathlons when we had the first Ironman 70.3 in
Mm.
the Philippines. And so I had to catch up with cycling, because cycling was my weakest sport among
Mm.
the different disciplines. So it was first swimming, running, and then cycling.
How does it feel to represent the country, and how did you kind of make the move from doing stuff locally and then you go outside?
That was actually a very good break. So what are the opportunities to get into a world championship course, right? The Vaseline Menextera. So that's Drew Arellano there. That's Hector. That's Mateo. That's me, and then my cousin Noy, who's the Filipino elite champion here. So that was my first world championship exposure. Got lucky winning the race format and the vote format across the globe, actually. Um, but in Hawaii, it was so surreal because the waves were really big and the competition was really, really tough because the world champion, Javier Gomez, was there. So it was a privilege it was a privilege. It's really memorable just to be able to race. But after that, and also in our company, those opportunities to go outside in the and represent the Philippines, right? Whether for work or for a sport,
Mm-hmm.
There's something that you take from it, right? That you come back with a bigger perspective that, oh, yung larong buko ko pala pwedeng, 'di
Mm-hmm.
ba? You kind of hold yourself against against a higher standard. So I'll share a little bit more pictures. So one of my international races was Ironman Malaysia here, and then this was in Vietnam. But for me, the, when during that gig when I was assigned in Vegas, I just signed up for this 300-kilometer Joshua Tree to Las Vegas ride, and then a Pacific Coast Highway ride. So after triathlon, kind of shifted to this sport, which is long distance riding. Um, but so maybe just one thing I'd like to share. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to share that in international races, it's really good to take away to hold yourself against a different standard. But at the same time, I also learned this at work
Mm-hmm.
na represent the country, represent yourself without that chip in the shoulder. You get what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Na parang kasi 'di ba laki tayo sa PBA tapos yung NBA ibang level yon, 'di ba?
Yeah, that's true.
Parang um it's far off, 'di ba? Parang kasi we don't get to have a chance to race with them, right? Or ang layo in terms of performance. Sa simula naman malayo pa talaga in terms of performance, no? But pag-aralin mo and then you train yourself and you hold yourself against a higher standard. But at the same time, not just the training. Napansin ko, Toby, and I observe this with you,
Mm.
especially now you're leading the globe, 'di ba? Parang in terms of that function. I also saw it both at work and in the way you play or do your sport na medyo mahirap if you carry it with a chip in the shoulder na parang dehado ka na agad.
Yeah, yeah,
Pinoy
absolutely.
medyo ano yung ano, 'di ba? Parang you get what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like it's okay to be maybe a little bit intimidated, right? Especially with
Yeah.
sports. Like I remember my first competition in CrossFit, and I was just so happy to make it, right? Like I knew,
Yeah.
like I'm 5'3", 160, 55 pounds at that time. So like I
Oo.
knew that there was no way I could lift or be as strong as or be as fit
Ganun
as
sa
anybody
simula.
there, right?
Yeah.
And um, but I think the awe, like the shock, like the joy of being there, it lasted for like it was a 2 day event. It lasted for the first day, and then the second day you knew what you know what like you earned your way, you qualified the right way, so now
Mhm.
it's time to just kind of prove it. So I've always kind of done better on second days, right? Like I kind of reserve a little bit of like I'm happy to be here part is always like the first event or the first workout or the second workout. Then afterwards, like I try to dial it in. I think it works in the office as well.
Yeah.
Especially in our industry, not a lot of Filipinos are given a chance to kind of step up and then be a global
Yeah.
leader and to show
Uh-huh.
everybody what Filipinos can do and can be. So when you
Yeah.
get there, be thankful for sure. Be thankful, but
Mhm.
quickly show to everybody and who you are and what brought you to the dance.
Mm.
What do you love most about preparing for a race, especially once for that long? Or now that you're into long distance cycling, like
Mhm.
what's the preparation like, and what do you love most about it?
So in terms of pacing, it's going to be a totally different mindset, no? Because for racing, your goal is to perform very fast, diba? Na ano. But for ultra long distances, um, you need to the mindset is basically just to survive, just like through this ECQ, 'di ba? Parang do you come out of this na yumaman ka or ano, pero 'di ba parang you just want to be able to finish in itself. It's a feat in itself, no? So compared to racing, for example, it's a 200, it's a 300. The first time I did those, it was the longest time. It was the longest ride of my life. As compared to a race, you need to do it first because mentally you need to test at what pace do you need to run. For example, the 21K, right?
Yeah.
But for the 200, 300, and at that, the first time I was doing it, I was trying to qualify for this 1200 race, which I'll share later about Paris-Brest Paris. It cannot be a hobby anymore. So that's the training thing. It cannot be something on the side or something that you'll tell yourself. Kasi totoo naman 'di ba? Busy sa work at may excuse ako at 'di ba? Parang hindi acceptable to sa work. Isipin mo, kailangan yung work, super importante 'yon, but at the same time, you signed up for something. Alam mong patay ka pag hindi ka and I think it also relates to those who have adopted it as a part of their lifestyle, diba? Katulad mo, I continue to follow your journey. Diba? We sign up for the experience mula nung simula, diba? In terms of ranking, magsisimula ka sa dulo, but eventually you improve, no? So parang when you put it as part of your lifestyle, and for me, I always approach it that even if I've accomplished this maybe in the past, it's all gone. I'm always a beginner, and if it's part of your lifestyle, the rent is due every day. I got inspired by this race that I heard, which was happening more than 100 years ago already, but it happens only every 4 years, and it's older than the Tour de France. It's called the Paris-Brest Paris. Okay? It's a 1,200 kilometer ride from Paris to the coast of Brest, which is the province of Brittany, where crepe comes from. So it was a far off goal, but I was really inspired for it. But to be able to join that, you need to qualify a 200, 300, 400, and then a 600 kilometer ride. And then you book your ticket to Paris. So I tried to 2011. I tried to I actually qualified. I was still in our company, but due to work constraints, I wasn't able to make the trip. So I had to wait for 4 years. So last 2015 was the next chance to get there. So I'll share the photos of Paris-Brest Paris. Maybe just to illustrate how this contributes mentally. So 1,230 kilometers. That's from Manila to Davao, probably, on a bike.
Oh my God!
In 90 hours or less than.
Was this nonstop for you guys, or you were obviously you guys were sleeping, resting, eating, right?
So the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. If you need to eat, if you need to sleep, manage it, right? If you ride too fast, you'll blow up, just like the guys at the lower end of the photo. That's a norm in most of the stops. So you need to sleep. So you need to balance that. And I think in our industry where we got trained to have a longer sleepless threshold. I think that was an advantage. So in 2011, the race that I was able to join, but I qualified in, there were 18 racers from the Philippines. Only one finished from the Philippines. In 2015, only 2 of us finished out of about I think all about 20 in 2015.
Wow.
So, and then I think our largest contingent was last year in 2019, the
Mm-hmm.
Paris-Brest Paris in 2019. About 7 of us finished out of around 40 from the Philippines. One of the fact, aside from the long distance, the wind chills was a factor. Sleep deprivation was a factor. And at the same time, in 90 hours and in the long distance, you're open to um, a lot of environmental constraints, right? Like although the roads were closed for the cyclists,
But you never
and
know, I guess, right?
you never know,
Mm.
but the wind, you don't know if you'll get a flat tire. You'll never know if you need to sleep more.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never know you're hungry or there's no water supply. But it's good that actually France is a cycling country,
Mm-hmm.
and then the villagers wait for this event every 4 years, and you would see kids cheering you at 2 a.m. Bon courage, bon courage. Um, so that's the challenge. Lucky to be able to finish it again in 2019. But I guess these things that we sign up for, whether we finish or not finish, both mentally and at the same time, if we take a look at our lives, how we balance both work, domestic matters, and the training for this, I think it's the whole process that you harvest out of it. So I wanted to segue during this ECQ, but and for me, in these kinds of events, you don't have to be fast. Just you also need to be crazy. For me, even this ECQ, it's your passion. You need to have grit. That's important. But you also need to not learn not to take things too seriously,
Mm-hmm.
especially if things are unpredictable and won't always go your way.
Mm.
So those are the things that's keeping me sane, keeping me motivated, keeping me training during this extended quarantine.
So I remember hitting you
You
up.
were tracking us in the app.
Yeah. Oh, you were
Yeah.
trying the app,
Mm.
right? And I remember you telling me that yeah, you got I think 2 flat tires. And in
Yeah.
my head, I was like, man, that's gotta suck because
Yeah.
like mass start
It does.
swimming, it's hard. So tell me about kind of how you, and of course you're still doing right now. So there's a point where you bounce back, but I'm sure it was tough at that particular moment in time of, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to be able to finish this.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. If you had a good swim, top 5% in terms of the group, right? I was able to catch up with the front pack. And definitely devastating, especially if you designed your whole year training for that race,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And then you get a flat and an irreparable flat because I had that my tubular tires were stuck when I tried to put I had there's a pit stop where it will automatically inflate it with a sealant and at the same time CO2 so that it will automatically so I had a plan for the flat, right? But even with the plan, there it was that little thing, the the tube that attaches to the tire, which got stuck up with a sealant, and I wasn't able to continue with the race anymore. So definitely it's part of biking, it's part of racing, but during those moments it really sucks.
Mm.
And it is frustrating because you pour out on
Ah,
these things for things that you train for,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But at the same time, those are the moments where you try to not take things too seriously and
yeah, yeah.
accept it
Yeah,
as it
absolutely.
is. I have a very quick story around that. It also
Mm.
happened to me the year after that. I did so I was the first Filipino who attempted and finished this. There's another race at 1200 in Perth-Albany-Perth. I'll share my screen quickly.
Australia.
It's in Australia.
Mm.
So deserts, there would be
Ah.
kangaroos in the
Ha.
night. And then they don't have 7-Eleven. The shops are closed or convenience stores at night, right? The shops are closed as early as 4 p.m. if it's time for beers, right?
Mm.
So, but most of the route was in the desert of
Mm.
Perth. Um, at the second night, so and a lot, I think only a third of those who started finished this because it was in the desert, but it was raining late that night. But one thing that happened to me, I was pretty trained. So after the Ironman, I continued training. I wanted to bounce back because that's the only way to deal with it mentally as well, right? You want to bounce back even stronger for any setback. At least that's my attitude in my life. That
Mm.
I take it, and then the very next day you try to bounce back. You go
Yeah.
back to the basics of training. You do your stretches. So this was a this was that next event that I signed up for. But again, the conditions were harsh. It was raining, the wind was strong, and then my brake cable snapped. My shift cable snapped. So for my bike, because there were a lot of hills, I think this ride had about 11,000 meters of climbing in total.
Holy
So
man.
that's 3,000 meters higher than Everest at
Right.
8,900. So about 2,000 meters higher. So I was stuck at the heavy gear. So there's no way I could finish the
Mm.
hills for this race, right? So I remember that moment I got the flat, and now this time another mechanical
Mm.
um, incident. And again, I was frustrated. I was out of my game. I was trying to repair it. I was trying to ask other riders if they had spare. Some of the organizers were actually looking at my bike. But the problem is everybody had Shimano in terms of their part.
Mm.
Mine was Campagnolo, Italian.
Mm.
Nobody had that part. What saved me for that race though, so I was frustrated. I don't know what to do. But this Japanese guy, the one at the bottom, for some reason, he was the only Japanese guy. I was the only Filipino guy. Um, I actually had the chance to ride with him in Las Vegas. He just flew in for that ride. Remember, I did
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Ah.
Joshua T to Las
Yeah. Yeah.
Vegas,
Ah.
and we had a bit of a chat. So he approached me and he told me he wasn't having a good day. He has already quit the race. What he did was he offered me his bike so that I
Wow.
can get to the next cutoff point so that
Oh.
I would be able to finish.
Wow.
So maybe my takeaway, things don't go according to plan even if you have a plan, right?
Mm.
But I think it also opens us up, one, to bounce back on the things that we can control,
Mm.
but at the same time open ourselves to blessings, right?
Mm.
Or still believe in the goodness of the human spirit, even though what we see in the news is very, very frustrating. But at times when we are vulnerable, at least those instances reminds me of faith in humanity. So those things, bounce back, and then maybe not just to be reliant on others, but um, open ourselves to blessings on things that's outside our control.
So how did you
Mm-hmm.
get that mentally strong? Like, is it upbringing, experience? Like you're a family of triathletes, multi-sport guys. Is it upbringing, experience? Like, how have you kind of grown this grit that you've had?
Mm-hmm. I think Toby, it's still a work in progress.
Mm.
Still a work in progress. I still get frustrated, but as we were discussing before we started the recording, those bruises, those setbacks, these lockdowns, I think they have a formative reason
Yeah.
in our training, right?
Mm.
Or in the whole process. If you take a look at it as a result or as an event, and it ends there at every situation, then you will lose it. Even right. So in terms of the mental game, if it's narrowed down to those constraints, I think we will always keep on losing
Mm.
and become frustrated. But I think what gets me going are a couple of things. One, having it in my system, having that training in in my system, and recognizing that actually it's not really about the race but the lifestyle that we are able um to pursue with this,
Mhm.
that mental clarity, that points of insight, as compared to overwhelming consumption of information or certain tasks. So one is for me, that mental state of being present. I think it's a big it's a big benefit that even during ECQ or during stressful times with the client or the big bosses, I think overthinking is the enemy.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
Absolutely.
right,
Uh-huh.
even in those races, or even as we are preparing a couple of things, when our heads get ahead of us,
Mm.
I think mentally that breaks us down. And for me, that's why I mentioned it's still a work in progress, because I'm still trying to catch myself when I'm preoccupied, when I'm getting stressed, when I'm getting frustrated because I already had a plan of the how the result will
Oh
be,
yeah. Oh yeah.
right?
Mm.
So the nature of events actually just disintegrates that,
Mm.
and brings you back to reality that things are not in your control.
Mm.
Be back to become a learner, and trust the process that um the pain is temporary, that the setback back is temporary, the rent will continue
To
to
be
be
paid, right?
due
Yep.
every
True.
day.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
just take it as it is, and take another day one the next day, and take all of these take all of this learning.
So what's next for you as we kind of ease out of the GC of ECQ and move into general quarantine, and then what's next from a training perspective?
Hmm. For me, it's the mental game first. Just
Mm.
like in a long distance race, most of those who didn't finish, I was riding with a lot of stronger riders, but they pushed it hard at the start. And
Mm.
I think over the long distances, what 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 those who survive are actually those who are able to hold their horses, if you get what
Mm.
I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to get excited, because you understand that it's going to be the, the
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 long haul,
the
right?
the race is going to be for the long haul.
Mhm.
So although I would love to ride outside, it is allowed already.
Mm.
I'm gonna stick to my game plan. I'm gonna hold it out.
Mm.
I'll still continue to train indoors. I'll continue to monitor the data, hoping for more sample size in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah, absolutely.
testing. But
Mm.
I think it's both the ability to adapt, but at the same time, the ability not to blink or panic or get excited, because there's some pent up energy
Yeah,
that you could
true.
sense, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
To
it's
those
gonna be
without
crazy on Monday.
alcohol,
It's gonna be crazy
it's
on
going to
Monday.
be
It's gonna be
it's
crazy.
going to be crazy for me. So in terms of what's next, I think it's going back to the here and now. The
Mm.
reality is there's still some risk.
Mm.
We're trying to make work from home work. We're trying to make new gigs for those who won't have opportunities for work. We're trying to protect the frontliners. There's a lot of complex things out
Uh-huh.
there. So for me, hold the horse and observe for the
Mm.
meantime.
All right, we're top of the hour. I wanted to end with, um, I guess, some advice, right? Like the way
Sure.
I had envisioned kind of producing this series was, hey, we'll invite athletes in, and focus on, like training and the process, but also the deep delve into like what we covered today, mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that mindset of an athlete, of somebody who's lived their life in sports for a long time, how does that transfer to real life? uh,
Mm-hmm.
what advice will you give to everybody that's trying to keep motivated to train, and to live life, these trying times?
Mm-hmm. I wanted to end with a story
Mm.
actually,
Awesome.
and I think at the end we can look for inspiration within ourselves. We can try harder, but at the same time, maybe my advice is open ourselves out to inspiration out there as well. There's good news. Seek it. it might be right there in front of you. So open ourselves to those things even through the darkest time. So I wanted to share um, something personal. This article actually came out a couple of days ago, and it's an article in the multi-sport uh, community about another athlete out there, which uh, even crazier than I am, is my sister. She was a runner from UP, going as a from college, and then running is basically a big part of her life, and multi-sport and triathlon. She's part of the Team David Salon, and she had a very good year this year. She ran a 4:30 marathon during that Ironman, which I had a
Wow.
flat on,
Uh-huh.
overtaking a lot of you. Um, she was racing. She raced in Chicago. 2 weeks after, was it Tokyo or Singapore? So it was a very full year for her. 3 days after finishing Chicago with our cousins there, when she got back here, we rushed her to the. I got a call, and we rushed her to the hospital, and it was a brain aneurysm,
Wow.
and the doctor was telling us already only 50% survive this.
Mm-hmm.
So set the expectation to your family, and to the 50% who survive this, only 60. There's a 66% chance of permanent brain damage.
Wow.
So even that, and that happened in October and November. So even before this ECQ, that was the dark time. Here she is now. But at the same time, um, I'm not sure if you're reading the news. Her doctor was Doc Gap Legaspi, leading the PGH battle
Mm.
against
COVID.
coronavirus
Uh-huh.
these days. Dr. Gap was also a runner, and before, the advice to her was, maybe you need to forget running for now,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to forget this lifestyle, this triathlon. And I wanted to share this to some of our viewers here. Right there could be that part of our lives that are locked down, especially the most important part during
Mm.
this ECQ. Most of the things that we love to do can be locked down. um, so for many months, it was hard mentally for her as well, trying to battle both the recovery,
Mm.
and at the same time not being able to do her passion, because it sent her through college, and after college she would support the grassroots program as well of that university at the back end, because she believed it's formative and it can create opportunities for life. But that was her state for the longest time. You can't run, focus on your recovery.
Mm.
For non-athletes, oh, that's nothing, right? You should really
Mm.
focus. But for her, that was a big thing. During this ECQ, I got a message from her that she finished the virtual Ironman,
Hmm.
which is a
Wow.
short distance. But um, although her doctor advised, right, the doctors gave her a limit that she can only reach 120 BPM.
Hmm.
And she did the whole thing by walking, by pedaling. It took maybe 4 times an average athlete would do,
Hmm.
but she just messaged me, forward is forward.
Hmm.
And maybe
That's amazing.
that's how I'd like to end, I think, in this ongoing thing of a lockdown,
Hmm.
and the things that are locked down in the different parts of our lives, right? It's good to be able to do virtual races. It finds its way, right? But I think for me, I find inspiration in that. There would be setbacks,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's the attitude that finds the opportunities, right? So
Ah, that's awesome.
with that, all the best to our
Hey, thank
to
you.
our multi-sport and our training. And as we go through this pandemic,
Hmm.
forward is forward.
We'll get there, man. But thank you. Like Reg again is one of the guys that I admire so much for what he's been doing. Imagine cycling 300 kilometers. Nobody even drives that distance anymore, right? So imagine biking it, right? And 1,230. right? Uh, it's insane. So man, be safe, stay healthy. All the best to you and your family, to your sister too, as she recovers, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. All the best to the podcast,
All right,
and looking forward to follow the next episodes.
all right.
Bye
Thank you.
everyone.